Good day everyone! So, ang i-discuss ko ngayon is about sa perspective ng intelligence ni Jean Piaget. So, Piaget focused on the mental processes that occur rather than on the actual measure of the intellect. Gumamit siya ng 4 areas para ma-define ang kanyang perspective ng intelligence. First is yung biological approach or biological adaptation, kung saan dito ay mas nagfo-focus sa physical and mental aspects ng katawan. This includes our reflexes, which occur when there is a certain stimuli na mag-trigger ng ating instinctive response. He discusses how we adapt a certain situation using assimilation and accommodation. More about that later po. Second is yung the succession of the stages. He believes that children must move through these stages during childhood. This includes sensory motor from birth to 2 years. During this stage, children go through a period of dramatic growth and learning. At this early period of this stage, includes basic reflexes, senses, and motor responses. So, the next stage is pre-operational stage, which is yung 2 to 7 years old. At this stage naman, kids learn through pretend plays, but nag-struggle pa rin sila with logic and taking the point of view of other people. The next stage is yung concrete operational, which is yung 7 to 11 years old. At this stage naman, kids begin to think about sa feelings tsaka yung sa iniisip ng ibang tao. Then the next one is yung formal operational, which is yung 12 years old and up. Ito na yung final stage. People is capable of seeing potential solutions sa mga problems and mas nag-iisip na sila ng more about scientifically about the world around them. So, the third one is yung knowledge. Piaget believes that knowledge is a biological function that results from the actions of an individual through change. It consists of structures and comes about by the adaptation of these structures with environment. So, the last one is yung intellectual competence. A child's measured by sa kung saang stage na ang meron sila. So, for example, kung yung isang bata ay can only do things that are in pre-operational or concrete operational stage, means it's the highest level of the child's whatever his or her age is. Thank you.
Jean Piaget and his theories of cognitive development have changed the understanding of human intelligence, especially in children. Although Piaget himself didn't develop any tests in understanding human intelligence, Piagetian theories are still used and studied to this day. Tests that benefits on his theories today are intelligence tests. For example, the Stanford Binet Intelligence Tests remains a popular intelligence assessment tool to this day, even though it received a number of revisions since it's been published. In early 1900s, the French government requires all children to attend school, so they asked Alfred Binet to help determine which students are likely to need specialized assistance in learning. Along with his colleague, Theodore Simon, they began to develop questions that focuses on areas like attention, memory, and problem-solving skills. During this time, he realized that children of various age can answer advanced questions that children of that age shouldn't normally be able to answer, as well as children who have difficulty answering in questions that they should know the answer at that age. His observations led to the conception of mental age, or a measure of intelligence based on the average abilities of children of a certain age group. The Binet-Simon scale, now known as the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Test, was first published in 1916 and quickly became the standard intelligence test used in the US. The Stanford-Binet Intelligence Test used a single number known as the intelligence quotient, or IQ, to represent the individual score on the test. Piaget never had a direct collaboration and impact on these tests at the time, but he later became interested in psychoanalysis and in fact took part in scoring on this assessment when he spent a year working at a boys' institution created by Binet himself. Piaget didn't develop any tests, but he designed a number of tasks that helped him develop his theory. These tasks intend to measure individual differences and have no equivalent psychometric intelligence test.
Okay, now watch.
Currently, these tasks help us understand how children understand things at different ages. There are 7 Piagetian tasks, generally tend to be acquired in this order. Number, usually acquired by age of 6. Length, liquid, mass, area, weight and volume,
Tell me why.
usually acquired by age 10.
So now it's longer.
Yeah.
Good?
The way that the same has.
Good. Okay, now watch this. We're going to take the blue water from this glass and we're going to pour it into this glass. Now, does this glass have more water? Does this glass have more water, or are they the same?
Has more water.
This one has more water?
Yeah.
Can you tell me why?
Because that one's higher than that one.
That one's higher than that one. Right.
They're the same.
They're the same now?
Yeah.
Okay, now watch. Now, does this one have more Play-Doh? Does this one have more Play-Doh, or are they the same?
That one has a more Play-Doh.
That one has more Play-Doh? Can you tell me why?
You smushed that one.
Because that one's smushed. Okay. Did we share the graham crackers fair? Is this fair?
Yes.
Yes? Can you tell me why it's fair?
You have one and I do.
I have one.
You have two and I have one.
Is that fair?
No.
No. How about now?
Now that's fair.
Now that's fair. Why is that fair?
You have two and I have two.
Jean Piaget contributed to the development of Binet and Simon Intellectual Development Test. Itong test na ito ay ginawa para ma-identify yung mga students na nangangailangan ng specialized educational assistance. Para to doon sa mga gifted children or yung mga children na merong mental deficiencies. Yung question na ito ay nagko-consist of 30 questions at ang questions na ito ay may level of difficulty na nakabase sa age or sa kakayahan ng bata. The test takers or participants of this test are those children between the age of 3 to 12. Ito ay minimeasure nila yung intellectual development or yung ability ng bata sa para sa pag-iisip or sa reasonings nila. Kung paano sila mag-follow ng command, mag-copy ng patterns, mag-name ng objects, or mag-put ng things in order. Yung test na ito ay nagfo-focus sa mental age, which is yung concept nito is
nagre-refers sa point ng average score sa table, which includes the average mental ages according to the estimated IQ values. Yung calculated na point according sa assessment ay result ng mga intelligence test ng bata. Halimbawa, kung ang bata ay physically 11 years old at ang kanyang mental age ay 11 years old according sa intelligence test, then yung batang yon ay merong average intelligence na another example, kung yung bata ay 8 years old physically and then yung score niya is 100% or tugma dun sa mental age niya, ibig sabihin average siya. Pero kung yung bata na 8-year-old ay nakakuha ng higher than his age or yung nakuha niyang score sa test ay pang 10-year-old, it is called above average. Dahil nga bata ang test takers or yung participant ng test na ito, medyo makaka-feel sila ng uncomfortable feeling, kaya pwede silang samahan ng isang member ng family. Pero, kung yung bata ay old enough to take the assessment alone, meron pa rin namang magsusupervise sa kanya. Ang duration ng assessment na ito ay nakadepende sa potential ng bata.
Good day. Let's discuss Piaget's subconstructs related to his perspective on intelligence. Intelligence is an adaptation. To say that intelligence is a particular instance of biological adaptation is thus to suppose that it is essentially an organization and that its function is to structure the universe just as the organism structures its immediate environment. So for Piaget, intelligence is an adaptation. Intelligence can be thought of as a type of biological adaptation to the world that has evolved over time. Adaptation at a symbolic level improves as cognitive abilities are learned, and mental trial and error replaces physical trial and error. On the other hand, naniniwala din si Piaget na ang cognitive growth doesn't occur purely by maturation or learning. He assumed that psychological systems are reorganized as a result of contact with our world. That's why Piaget identified 4 phases of intellectual development that he believed we all go through throughout our lives. While people progress through these stages at various rates and at different ages, he assumed that their order was predetermined, or what we shall say, fixed. Moreover, the interaction of biological influences and learning, according to Piaget, is what causes these phases of cognitive development to occur. Knowledge, as claimed by Piaget, cannot simply arise from sensory experiences, but some initial framework is needed to make sense of the world. According to him, children are born with a very simple mental structure that is genetically inherited and evolved, on which all subsequent learning and understanding is based. Piaget referred to the schema as the fundamental building block of intelligent behavior, a method of organizing information. A schema is a set of interconnected mental representations of the world that we use to comprehend and react to certain situations, and it organizes information and regulates behavior. It enables us to form mental representations of the world and may be thought of as units of knowledge, each relating to a different aspect of the world, such as things, behavior, and abstract theoretical concepts. When Piaget spoke of a person's mental processes developing, he was referring to an improvement in the amount and complexity of schemata that a person had acquired. Piaget stressed the importance of schemas in cognitive development and explained how they are established. The assumption is that we save these mental images and use them when we need them. In short, we develop cognitive patterns in many things. We then use the schema we have developed as a means to compare new information against. For example, A person might have a schema about buying a meal in a restaurant. The schema here includes looking at a menu, or ordering food, eating it, and paying the bill. The idea here is that whenever they are in a restaurant or see a restaurant, they retrieve this schema from memory and apply it to the situation. Another example: babies have a sucking reflex, which is triggered by something touching the baby's lips. Thus, a baby will suck a nipple, a comforter, or a person's finger. Lastly, the grasping reflex, which is elicited when something touches the palm of a baby's hand, or the rooting reflex, in which a baby will turn its head toward something which touches its cheeks. For the process of adaptation, Jean Piaget, 1952, viewed intellectual growth as a process of adaptation or adjustment to the world. This happens through assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. As claimed by Piaget, humans interpret and adapt to new knowledge through assimilation. Assimilation entailed incorporating external elements into the frameworks of our lives or cultures, or those that we might acquire through experience. It is the method of incorporating new knowledge that is consistent with pre-existing cognitive schemas, perceptions, and understanding. When humans are confronted with new or unknown knowledge, they turn to previously acquired information to help them make sense of it. This means that when we are presented with new information, we make sense of it by referring to previously processed and learned information, and we attempt to incorporate the new information into the previously processed and learned information. So for the example of assimilation, pakitignan na lang po yung picture. Nakita ng child yung four-legged animal for the first time. Tapos, tinawag niya yung four-legged animal na yon na doggy. After some time, kapag nakakakita na siya ng similar na animal na mayroong four legs that walks on land, tatawagin niya na rin itong doggy. Kasi, inassimilate na niya yung dati niyang information na kapag four-legged tapos naglalakad sa land, dog ang tawag dun. So every time na makakakita siya ng four-legged animal that walks on land, tatawagin niya na itong dog. So that's assimilation. Accommodation, on the other hand, is the method of taking new knowledge in one's environment and modifying pre-existing schemas to fit in. This occurs when the original schema or knowledge fails to function and must be modified to accommodate a new entity or situation. People will continue to interpret new ideas, schemas, structures, and more if they are not accommodated. In order to make sense of new information, we must first modify existing information or schemas, for example, to make room for the new information. So here is an example of accommodation. When the child saw a cow for the first time, she will assimilate her schema of doggy as four-legged animal. Bali dito, may pre-existing knowledge na yung bata on what a four-legged animal looks like and what it is called. So tatawagin niya yung animal na yon na doggy kahit hindi naman yung dog. But when her mother told her that it is a cow, she will accommodate this new information and will refer to that animal as cow, not a doggy. Dahil nga merong accommodation sa cognitive development ng isang individual, babaguhin at pwede i-modify yung ating pre-existing information or knowledge with the help of an adult or anyone na hindi lahat ng animal na four-legged ay dog, na pwede din itong cow, horse, or goat. Bali, ang main idea ng accommodation ay i-modify at i-update mo lang yung pre-existing knowledge mo about something. That's accommodation. Piaget believed that the human brain has been programmed through evolution to bring equilibrium, which is what he believed that ultimately influences structures by the internal and external processes through assimilation and accommodation. Piaget argued that all human thinking seeks order and is dissatisfied with knowledge systems that contain contradictions and inconsistencies. To put it another way, we aim for equilibrium in our mental structures. Equilibrium is the process in which children recognize their schemes to return to a state of equilibrium when disequilibrium occurs. Equilibrium occurs when a child's schemas can deal with most new information through assimilation. When new knowledge cannot be fitted into existing schemas or assimilation, however, an undesirable state of disequilibrium occurs. Piaget assumed that cognitive growth did not advance at a gradual pace, but rather in leaps and bounds. Equilibration is the driving force behind the learning process because we don't like being frustrated and will strive to regain equilibrium by mastering the new task or problem, or also known as accommodation. I hope that you understand our discussion about Piaget's subconstructs related to his perspective on intelligence. Thank you for listening.
We will talk about the psychometric properties which cover the reliability and validity of John Piaget's intelligence test. So now we will start about the reliability of intelligence test.
So now let's talk about the reliability. So si Piaget, he uses qualitative methods, observations, and clinical interviews. So under this, sa observations, he used naturalistic observation and controlled observation. So let's define naturalistic observation. Research method in which people or other subjects are observed in their natural setting. So yun yung naturalistic observation. Inobserve ni John Piaget yung kanyang tatlong nephews on their natural settings. So yun. So he sometimes used the controlled observation. So, controlled observation naman, it is a research method where researchers watch participants in a contained environment such as a laboratory. In a controlled study, the researcher predetermines and controls the study variables and determines the location, the time, the participants, and the tools used to complete study. So, aside from that, he also used clinical interviews, in which it is a tool that helps physicians, psychologists, and researchers make an accurate diagnosis of a variety of mental illnesses such as OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder. So since he used qualitative methods, we expect that it is more on descriptive, more on observations and words rather than numbers and statistical methods. Okay? And his research is based on a very small samples.
So when we say small samples, dito sa nabanggit, is small samples kasi si John Piaget, nagsimula siya sa certain group of people which is yung mga pamangkin niya. Doon siya nag-start magsagawa ng clinical observation. Pero yung tatlong pamangkin niya na yun, hindi pa sila nagre-response. So, nagsimula siya ng testing, intelligence testing, doon sa mga taong nakakapag-response na, which is children na yung tawag, hindi na infant. Children stage na siya nagsimula nung magsagawa ng intelligence testing. Kasi yung mga children, nakakapag-response na sila, nakakapagsalita na. So, yung observation na ginawa niya, dun lang yun sa mga pamangkin niya na hindi pa kayang mag-response through verbal responses.
These methods are not standardized and therefore not replicable. So, since through observations and clinical interviews, yung method na ginawa niya, or rather yung tool na ginamit niya to acquire information, there is no standards na sinusunod. And therefore, not replicable since, ayun nga, wala siyang sinusunod na standards, hindi siya replicable or hindi siya generalized or hindi siya applicable sa lahat. Na halimbawa, yung test ni John Piaget sa cognitive development or yung yung kanyang methods or observations dun sa tatlo niyang pamangkin, kung ano yung naging result nun is as the same din sa ibang bata. So, hindi ganon. So, hindi siya replicable. So, it says here that the test will not be considered reliable if it produces inconsistent and unreliable results every time. Of course, kapag inconsistent yung binibigay na resulta, it is not trustworthy or it is not accurate para masabi natin na tama yung test na isinasagawa. So, what Piaget wanted to do was not to measure how well children could count, spell, or solve problems as a way of grading their IQ. What he was more interested in was the way in which fundamental concepts like the very idea of number, time, quantity, causality, justice, and so on emerged.
So, that means na hindi nakafocus si John Piaget kung paano natututo yung bata. Nagpo-focus siya more dun sa kung saan nanggagaling yung pagkatuto nila, which saan pinaka-root ng knowledge nila. So, dito na papasok yung nature of test, which is the schema, the
assimilation, accommodation, and then the equilibration. Those are the 4 factors that John Piaget believed na nakaka-affect or factor na nakaka-apekto sa intelligence ng isang bata.
So, if we say schema, ito yung dinidefine ni John Piaget as the basic building blocks of intelligence behavior. Ito yung nag-organize ng knowledge dun sa utak ng bata. Kumbaga, yung schema, sila yung tinatawag na filing index card sa root, sa mind ng mga bata, which is may magpa-pop up na card kapag nagsasagot sila ng test, kapag yung test is may numbers, counting numbers, yung magpa-pop up na filing card dun sa schema nila is to know kung bakit nila, kung ang way ng approach nila sa test na yun is magbibilang kasi numbers. So yun yung specific na definition or by example definition ng schema.
So, John Piaget suggested that children sort the knowledge they acquire through their experiences and interactions into groupings known as schemas. So, just like what RG said, yun nga, nakafocus si John Piaget doon sa roots, yung pinagmulan mismo ng knowledge, hindi yung na-acquire na knowledge. Okay? So, when new information is acquired, it can either be assimilated into existing schemas. So, schemas, yung background knowledge or yung background experience ng bata, or accommodated through revising an existing schema or creating an entirely new category of information. So, that's how it works. So, that's the idea of John Piaget na doon sa schema niya, may background knowledge siya na kapag meron siyang na-acquire na panibagong information, it can either be assimilated into existing schema or madagdag siya doon sa background knowledge na meron yung bata or accommodated through revising. So, pwedeng maitama yung schema niya doon sa isang bagay na yon, or creating an entirely new category of information or make a new information doon sa bata. So, yun po.
So, now let's talk about the validity of the test. So, ano nga ba yung validity na sinasabi? So, ang sabi, yung validity daw is estimate how well a test measure or yung purpose to measure in a particular context. So, sabi, ang validity is kung ano ba yung iniisip ni John Piaget na itetest niya, or doon niya binase doon sa kwento ng broken cups, which is gusto niya malaman yung difference ng kung ano ba yung tama or kung ano yung fair. Pero sa children's point, yung view ng mga children. So dito, pwedeng isagot nung mga bata na sasabihin nila na ganito yung view nila kasi yung may binigay kang circumstances. Pero hindi yun specifically na gusto nila mangyari yung ganong sinabi nila. Kasi nga, nagbigay ng circumstances si Gian Piaget. So, ang binigay ng bata is yung kung ano talaga mangyayari sa circumstances, pero hindi actually mean na gusto nila mangyari yun. Magkaiba yung right, magkaiba yung fair. Yun yung sinasabi sa Broken Cups na kwento ni Gian Piaget. So, yung validity na pwedeng masabi dito sa test is yung idea ni Gian Piaget na kung paano nag-a-acquire ng nature na-acquire ng mga bata yung nature of knowledge itself, or yung paano nila na-acquire or nako-construct or nagagamit yung knowledge as they grow. Kasi nga sa cognitive development, nagsasuggest sila ng pagbabago kada mag-grow sila. Pero yung process of progressing by stages, yung iba hindi na-attain yung stages na nakuha na dinaanan nila before. Pero yung iba, later or advanced nagpo-progress sa certain stages na dinadaanan nila. So, dadaan naman tayo ngayon sa ano yung evidence or construct validity. So, ano nga ba yung evidence of construct validity? Ito yung various techniques of construct validation may provide evidence. So, ano yung evidence na hinahanap natin? So, yung sabi ni Piaget, hindi niya kinlaim na may particular stages na nare-reach yung certain age ng mga bata. Though, yung stages na to, hindi nag-indicate ng specific na age or average na age na ma-reach nung stage na yon. So, yung meron silang differences. So, yung differences na sinasabi ko, yun nga yung ibang bata, hindi nila na-attain yung dapat na progress during the stage na kinabibilangan nila, yung formal, pre-operational, or operational stage. May mga progress na hindi nila na-attain, or yung iba na-attain ng advance. This explains na paano nagko-construct yung bata ng view nila sa certain circumstances, or kung paano gusto ni John Piaget na yung bata mag-construct ng mental model sa mundo or sa world. So, sinasabi dito sa validity or sa evidence of construct validity na dinidisagree ni John Piaget na yung idea ng intelligence is hindi siya fixed trait, or rather, it is a cognitive development as a process which occurs due to biological maturation and interaction with the environment. So, na-acquire mo din siya habang nagde-develop ng mental and physical maturation. Kaya nga, biological maturation, doon papasok yung physical. So, hindi mo lang daw siya na-acquire through trait na nakukuha mo sa mga magulang mo, kundi nadadagdagan siya or nagbabago siya as we grow older.